Before we dive into this extraordinary story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. This journey will challenge everything you think you know about love and family. Enjoy the story. My name is William Harrison, but everyone calls me Bill. I'm 70 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened just 3 months ago. It shattered everything I believed about my life, my marriage, and the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in the world. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. Patricia, my wife of 45 years, had gone to her weekly book club meeting, something she'd been doing religiously for over a decade. I was sitting in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd shared thousands of meals together, reading the newspaper and enjoying my morning coffee. The phone rang at exactly 9:47 a.m. I remember the time because I glanced at the clock on the microwave, thinking it was early for anyone to be calling. "Hello," I answered, expecting a telemarketer or maybe our daughter Rebecca calling from California. "Is this William Harrison?" The voice was female, older, with a slight southern accent I didn't recognize. "Yes, this is Bill. Who's calling?" There was a pause that seemed to last forever. Then I heard the woman take a deep, shaky breath. "Mr. Harrison, my name is Margaret Cross, and I need to talk to you about Patricia." Something in her tone made my stomach drop. There was pain in her voice, but also determination. "What about Patricia? Is she okay? Has something happened to her, Mr. Harrison?" Another pause. "Patricia is my wife." Those 4 words hit me like a freight train. I actually felt the blood drain from my face, and I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "Patricia is my wife. We've been married for 50 years, and we have 3 adult children together. Mr. Harrison, I think you need to know that you're not her husband, you're her lover." The room started spinning round me. I couldn't breathe properly. This had to be some kind of mistake, some cruel joke, maybe even a scam. But something deep in my gut told me this woman was telling the truth. "That's impossible," I managed to say, my voice cracking like a teenager's. "Patricia and I have been married since 1978. We have a marriage certificate, we have a daughter together. We own this house together. We've built a life together. Mr. Harrison, I have marriage certificates too. Birth certificates for our 3 children. Tax returns filed jointly for 50 years. And I have something else, 45 years of photographs of Patricia living a completely different life than the one she's been living with you." I sank into my kitchen chair, the same chair where I'd eaten breakfast with Patricia just 2 hours earlier. She'd kissed my forehead before leaving, told me she loved me, reminded me to take my blood pressure medication. How could any of this be real? "How do you know about me?" I whispered. "I hired a private investigator last month. Patricia's been disappearing for days at a time for decades. Mr. Harrison, she tells me she's visiting her sick cousin in Atlanta, or attending professional development seminars for her consulting work. But I found out there is no sick cousin. There are no seminars, there's you." My mind was racing through 45 years of memories, and suddenly things that had never made sense before were clicking into place. Patricia's frequent business trips, the way she'd sometimes get mysterious phone calls and step outside to take them. How she'd never let me meet her family, always saying they lived too far away or were too busy. The holidays she'd spend with relatives while I stayed home alone. "Mr. Harrison, are you still there?" "Yes," I said, though I felt like I was floating outside my own body. "Yes, I'm here. I know this is devastating. It was devastating for me too when I found out about you. But I think we need to meet. I think we need to talk about what Patricia has done to both of our families." That's when I heard the front door open. Patricia's voice drifted from the hallway, cheerful and familiar. "Bill, I'm home. You won't believe what happened at book club today. Martha brought the most delicious coffee cake, and we had the most fascinating discussion about." Her voice got closer as she walked toward the kitchen. I looked down at the phone in my trembling hand, then up at the doorway where my wife of 45 years was about to appear. Patricia walked in with a bright smile, her silver hair perfectly styled, her cheeks rosy from the cool morning air. She was wearing the blue cardigan I'd bought her for Christmas, the one she said was her favorite. "Who are you on the phone with?" she asked, noticing my expression. Her smile faltered. "Bill, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stared at this woman I'd shared my bed with for 45 years. This woman who'd given birth to our daughter. This woman I'd planned to grow old with. And I realized I might not know her at all. "Patricia," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we need to talk." The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Her purse slipped from her hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. In that instant, before she even knew what the phone call was about, I saw the truth written across her face. She knew. Dear God in heaven, she knew exactly why I looked like my world had just ended. Because it had. The silence in that kitchen stretched on forever. Patricia stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the phone in my hand like it was a loaded gun. I watched her face cycle through emotions, surprise, fear, and something that looked like resignation. "Bill," she said carefully, "who's on the phone?" I looked at this woman I'd loved for 45 years and realized I was about to ask her a question that would change both our lives forever. "Patricia, is there something you need to tell me about Margaret Cross?" If I'd had any doubt that Margaret was telling the truth, Patricia's reaction erased it completely. She went white as a sheet and actually stumbled backward, catching herself against the doorframe. I don't know who that is," she said, but her voice was shaking so badly I could barely understand her. "Margaret Cross," I repeated, standing up from my chair. "The woman on this phone who says she's been married to you for 50 years. Patricia's legs seemed to give out. She slid down the doorframe until she was sitting on the kitchen floor, staring up at me with tears starting to stream down her face. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, Bill, I can explain." Those 4 words, "I can explain," told me everything I needed to know. If Margaret Cross was lying, Patricia would have been outraged, confused, demanding to know who was making such ridiculous claims. Instead, she was crying and promising explanations. I brought the phone back to my ear. Margaret was still there, waiting quietly. "Mrs. Cross," I said, "I think you're telling the truth. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Can you give me your number? I think I need to call you back." After I talked to Patricia, of course, she gave me her number, and I wrote it down with hands that were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. "Mr. Harrison, for what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person. I think you're a victim here, just like I am." After I hung up, I looked down at Patricia, still sitting on the kitchen floor, crying like her heart was breaking. "How long?" I asked. "Bill, please, let me explain how long, Patricia." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Since before I met you." The words hit me like a slap. "You were already married when we met." "Yes, I had to sit back down 45 years ago, when I was 25 years old, and Patricia was 23. I'd thought I was meeting the woman of my dreams. We'd met at a coffee shop downtown. She was reading a book on psychology, and I'd struck up a conversation about it. She was beautiful, intelligent, funny. We talked for hours that first day. Patricia, when we got married in 1978, you were committing bigamy. I know, our marriage certificate. It's not legal. I know, Rebecca. The thought of our daughter hit me like a truck. Does Rebecca know? No, no one knows, except Margaret and me. And now you. I stood up and started pacing around the kitchen. 45 years of my life suddenly felt like a lie. Every anniversary we'd celebrated, every time she'd called me her husband, every time I'd introduced her as my wife, it was all based on deception. How is this even possible? I asked. How do you maintain 2 marriages, 2 families, 2 completely separate lives? Patricia slowly got up from the floor and sat in her usual chair at the kitchen table. It wasn't easy. It required ... a lot of planning. Planning. I stopped pacing and stared at her. You planned this. You deliberately chose to deceive 2 men, 2 families, for 45 years. It wasn't like that, Bill. It started as I was young, and I made a mistake, and then it just got so complicated, and I didn't know how to fix it without destroying everyone I loved, everyone you loved. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and fierce. Patricia, you can't love someone and lie to them for 45 years. That's not love. I don't even know what that is. She was crying harder now. I do love you, Bill. I love you, and I love Margaret, and I love all our children. I know that sounds impossible, but it's true. Our children. I sat back down, feeling dizzy. How many children do you have, Patricia? 4, Rebecca with you, and 3 with Margaret. Thomas is 47, Linda is 44, and David is 41. For children, Rebecca had siblings she'd never met, siblings who didn't know she existed. Do they know about me? No, they think I travel for work. Consulting. I've been telling them that for decades. And what do you tell them about the time you spend here? The time you spend being my wife? I tell them I'm visiting my sister in Atlanta. I felt like I was going insane. You don't have a sister in Atlanta. I know, Patricia. Do you understand what you've done? Do you understand that you've built our entire relationship on lies? She looked up at me with those green eyes I'd fallen in love with 45 years. Go, Bill. I know how this looks. I know how horrible this must be for you. But I need you to understand that my love for you is real. Everything we've shared, everything we've built together, that's real. How can it be real if it's based on lies? Because love isn't about marriage certificates or legal documents. It's about what we feel for each other, what we've shared, how we've supported each other through everything. I stared at her, this woman who'd shared my bed, my home, my life, for 45 years. Patricia, you've made me an unknowing participant in adultery for my entire adult life. You've made me the other man without my consent. I never meant for it to hurt you. But it was always going to hurt me eventually, wasn't it? This couldn't last forever. She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she nodded. I've been terrified of this day for 45 years. Why now? Why is Margaret calling me now? Because I've been getting sloppy, confused, making mistakes. She hired a private investigator because she suspected I was having an affair. I looked at this woman I thought I knew, and I realized I didn't know her at all. Patricia, I need you to leave. What? I need you to leave this house. I need time to think, and I can't do that with you here. Bill, please, can't we talk about this? We just did talk about it. You've been lying to me for 45 years. Our marriage isn't legal. Our life together is built on deception and fraud. I need you to go. She stood up slowly, like an old woman, though she was only 6. Where should I go? I don't know, Patricia. Go to Margaret, go to your real family. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I was beyond caring about her feelings at that moment. As she gathered her purse and coat, she turned back to me one more time. Bill, I know you hate me right now, and I understand why. But please, before you make any permanent decisions, remember the 45 years we've had together. Remember how happy we've been. After she left, I sat alone in that kitchen for hours, staring at Margaret Cross's phone number and wondering how I was going to tell Rebecca that her entire life had been built on lies. I didn't call Margaret Cross that day, or the next day. For 3 days, I wandered around our house like a ghost, touching things that Patricia and I had bought together, looking at pictures of our life, trying to figure out what was real and what was performance. Rebecca called on Thursday evening, like she always did. My daughter, now 43 years old, with 2 kids of her own, living her busy life in San Francisco. How was I supposed to tell her that her mother had another family she'd never met? "Hi, Dad. How are you and Mum doing?" I almost broke down. "Right there, we're fine, sweetheart. You sound weird. Is everything okay?" "Just tired, honey. You know how it is at our age." "Where's Mum? Can I talk to her?" She's visiting her cousin in Atlanta." The lie tasted like poison in my mouth. "Again? Didn't she just go there last month?" Rebecca's question hit me like a lightning bolt. She was right. Patricia had claimed to visit her cousin just 5 weeks ago. But now I knew there was no cousin. She'd been with Margaret and her other family. "Dad, seriously, you sound really strange. What's going on?" "Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Growing up, did you ever wonder why we never met Mum's family? Why she never talked about her relatives?" There was a pause. "Sometimes, I guess, but she always said they lived far away and weren't very close." "Why are you asking?" "Just curious. I've been thinking about family lately. After I hung up with Rebecca, I realized I couldn't put off calling Margaret Cross any longer. I needed to understand the full scope of what Patricia had done to both our families." Margaret answered on the second ring. "Mr. Harrison, yes, it's Bill. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I needed time to process everything, of course. How are you holding up?" "Not well, to be honest." I confronted Patricia, and she admitted everything. "She's been gone for 3 days now." "She's here," Margaret said quietly. "She came home Tuesday night, crying, saying she needed to tell me something important. She told me about you, about your daughter, about the life she's been living for 45 years. I felt a stab of something, jealousy, anger, that Patricia had run to Margaret for comfort. How are you handling it?" "I'm devastated. 50 years of marriage, and I find out I've been sharing my wife with another man the entire time. But I'm also angry, Mr. Harrison. Not at you, at her, at what she's done to both of us." "Margaret, can I ask you something? Did you ever suspect?" Looking back, there were signs. So many signs. The business trips that seemed excessive. The way she'd sometimes call me by the wrong name when she was tired. Phone calls she'd take in private. But I trusted her. I loved her. I never imagined she was capable of something like this. I know exactly what you mean. I did the same thing, rationalized away anything that didn't make sense. "Mr. Harrison, Bill, I think we need to meet. Face to face. There are things about Patricia that I think you need to know, and I suspect there are things about her that I need to know too." "What kind of things?" "Financial things, legal things. I've been looking through our documents since she confessed, and I'm finding discrepancies that go back decades. I think she's been maintaining separate financial lives too." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I mean our house is mortgaged, even though I thought we'd paid it off years ago. I mean there are credit cards I've never seen statements for. I mean she might have been using our marriage to get loans or credit that she's been funneling to your life together." I felt sick. Margaret, are you saying she might have been stealing from you to support our household? I'm saying I don't know what she's been doing with money, but something isn't right. And I think you should check your own finances too. After I hung up with Margaret, I went straight to my desk and pulled out our financial records. Patricia had always handled most of our money management. She was better with numbers, she said, and it was one less thing for me to worry about. That, as I went through bank statements, credit card bills, and investment accounts, a terrifying picture started to emerge. There were regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, credit cards in both our names that I'd never seen, loans taken out against our house that I'd never signed for. But the most shocking discovery was a life insurance policy on me for $500,000, with Patricia as the sole beneficiary, a policy I'd never signed, with a signature that looked like mine but somehow wasn't quite right. I called Margaret back immediately. Margaret, I found something. I think Patricia has been forging my signature on financial documents. Oh God. Bill, how bad is it? I don't know yet, but it's bad. There's money missing, unauthorized loans, even a life insurance policy I never signed for. This is worse than adultery, Bill. This is fraud. This is identity theft. Margaret, I think we need to involve the police. I think you're right, but first, I think we need to meet. I think we need to understand the full scope of what she's done before we decide how to handle it, when and where. Tomorrow, there's a coffee shop halfway between us, Henderson's Calf, on Route 9. Can you meet me there at 2 o'clock? I'll be there. Bill, one more thing. I think you should know that Patricia has been asking to see you. She says she needs to explain everything, that there's more to the story than what we know. More. I couldn't imagine what could be worse than what I'd already learned. That's what she says. She's begging me to arrange a meeting between the three of us. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me never wanted to see Patricia again, but another part of me needed answers. I needed to understand how someone I'd loved and trusted could have deceived me so completely for so long. Okay, I said, set it up. But Margaret, I want you there when I talk to her. I don't trust myself to be alone with her right now. I understand. And Bill. Yes, we're going to get through this. We're both victims here, but we're going to figure out how to move forward. As I prepared for bed that night in a house that felt foreign and empty, I wondered if Margaret was right. Could we get through this? Could I rebuild a life that had been based on lies for 45 years? And what else was Patricia hiding that she felt she needed to confess? Meeting Margaret Cross was one of the strangest experiences of my life. I walked into Henderson's Calf at exactly 2 o'clock, and I knew immediately which woman was her. She looked like someone who'd been carrying a heavy burden for a long time, tired eyes, silver hair, but with a strength in her posture that reminded me of Patricia. Bill, she asked as I approached her table. Margaret, thank you for meeting me. We shook hands, and I sat down across from her. For a moment, we just looked at each other, two people who'd unknowingly shared the same woman for 45 years. This is surreal, Margaret said finally. That's exactly what I was thinking. She had a folder with her, thick with documents. I've been doing more research since we talked yesterday. Bill, what Patricia has done to us goes far beyond bigamy and adultery. What do you mean? Margaret opened the folder and pulled out a marriage certificate. This is my marriage certificate with Patricia, dated June 15, 1973. Then she pulled out another one. And this is a marriage certificate with someone named Sandra Mitchell, dated August 3, 1974. I stared at the documents. Who is Sandra Mitchell? I think that's another identity Patricia created. Look at the signature. It's Patricia's handwriting, but the name is different. She showed me more documents. Birth certificates for children I'd never heard of. Property deeds in different names. Bank accounts under various identities. Margaret, how many lives has Patricia been living? I don't know, but I think we might be just two of several men she's been deceiving. The room started spinning. Several men. I found evidence of at least 4 different identities. Bill, Patricia Cross, who's married to me. Patricia Harrison, who's married to you. Sandra Mitchell, who appears to have been married to someone in Texas. And Elena Rodriguez, who has property records in Florida. I felt like I was going to be sick. Are you telling me that Patricia is some kind of ... con artist? I think that's exactly what I'm telling you. Margaret pulled out more papers. I hired a private investigator after our phone call yesterday. He's been digging deeper, and Bill, Patricia isn't even her real name. What? Her real name is Linda Catherine Walsh. She's originally from Ohio, and she has a criminal record. The cafe seemed to fade away around me. Criminal record for what? Marriage, fraud, identity theft, check fraud. She served 2 years in prison from 1969 to 1971, before either of us met her. I couldn't speak. This woman I'd loved, trusted, built a life with, she was a career criminal. There's more, Margaret said gently. The investigator thinks she might have done this before, in other states, with other men. How many other men? We don't know yet. But Bill, we're not just victims of adultery. We're victims of an organized, long-term criminal enterprise. I put my head in my hands. Our daughter. Does Rebecca know any of this? I don't think any of the children know. My kids certainly don't. But Bill, there's something else about the children that you need to know. I looked up at her. What? I don't think Patricia gave birth to all of them. What do you mean? I mean, I think some of the children she claims as hers might be adopted, or might belong to other men she's been involved with. The investigator found inconsistencies in birth records and hospital records. The magnitude of what Margaret was telling me was overwhelming. Are you saying Rebecca might not be Patricia's biological daughter? I'm saying we need DNA tests for all the children, because I don't think we know the truth about anything. I sat back in my chair, trying to process this information. Margaret, we need to go to the police. I agree. But first, I think we need to confront Patricia together. We need to hear what she has to say before we involve law enforcement. When, tonight, she's agreed to meet with both of us at my house at 7 o'clock. She says she's ready to tell us everything. Everything. That's what she says. She claims there are reasons for what she's done, circumstances we don't understand. I looked at this woman who'd been unknowingly sharing Patricia with me for decades. Margaret, before we do this, I need to ask you something personal. What did you love her? Do you still love her? Margaret was quiet for a long time. I loved the person I thought she was. The woman who raised my children, who shared my bed for 50 years, who I thought was my soulmate. But that person might not exist. The real Patricia, or Linda, or whoever she is. I don't know if I can love a criminal who's been lying to me for half a century. I feel exactly the same way. Bill, can I ask you something? Of course. When Patricia was with you, did she seem happy? Genuinely happy? I thought about it carefully. Yes, that's what makes this so confusing. She seemed to love our life together. She seemed to love me, and Rebecca, and the home we'd built. It didn't feel like an act. That's what I don't understand. If she was running some kind of con, why did she stay for so long? Why didn't she take our money and disappear years ago? Maybe she did take our money. Maybe what we thought was our money was actually money she stole from other victims. Margaret nodded sadly. Maybe we were never her husbands at all. Maybe we were just her longest-running marks. As I drove home from that meeting, I realized that everything I thought I knew about Patricia, about our marriage, about our family, might be completely false. The woman I'd shared my life with for 45 years might be a stranger, and in a few hours I was going to sit across from her and demand the truth about who she really was. Chapter 5. The 3 days after Patricia's devastating confession were the longest of my life. She had returned to Margaret's house, leaving me alone in our home with 45 years of memories that now felt tainted with lies. I wandered through each room like a stranger, touching objects that Patricia and I had chosen together, looking at photographs of our life, trying to separate what was real from what was performance. The coffee mug she used every morning, had she drunk from a similar mug at Margaret's house? The anniversary cards we'd exchanged, had she written identical sentiments to Margaret? Everything felt contaminated by deception. On Thursday morning, I was sitting in my study when I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. Patricia's desk drawer was slightly open, and I could see the corner of what looked like a small notebook. In 45 years of marriage, I'd never invaded her privacy. But desperate times called for desperate measures. Inside the drawer, I found 3 small address books. 3 separate books with different handwriting styles, different names, different contact information. One was labeled P. Harrison, Patricia's identity with me. Another was P. Cross, her identity with Margaret. The third was simply L.W. Zell, and I had no idea what that stood for. My hands shook as I opened the L.W. book. Inside were addresses and phone numbers for people I'd never heard of, in cities I didn't recognize. There were doctor's appointments listed under different names, bank accounts with numbers I'd never seen, and what looked like a completely separate life I knew nothing about. Dear God, I whispered to myself. How many lives was she living? I called Margaret immediately. Margaret, I found something. Address books. Multiple identities. I think Patricia's deception might be even worse than we thought. What do you mean worse? I mean, I think there might be more than just 2 families. There was silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Margaret spoke. Bill, I've been going through Patricia's things here too. I found a post office box key hidden in her jewelry box, and rental agreements for a storage unit I've never heard of. What's in the storage unit, I don't know. I haven't been there yet. I was afraid of what I might find. Margaret, I think we need to investigate this together. I think we need to understand the full scope of what Patricia has been doing. We agreed to meet at the storage facility that afternoon. The address was in a part of town neither of us frequented, and when we arrived, I felt like we were about to uncover evidence of crimes rather than just marital deception. The storage unit was larger than I'd expected, and when Margaret opened it with the key she'd found, we both gasped. It was like looking into a life neither of us had ever seen. There were boxes labeled with different names: Patricia Harrison, Patricia Cross, Linda Walsh, Elena Rodriguez. Each box contained what appeared to be a complete identity: social security cards, driver's licenses, birth certificates, credit cards, bank statements. Margaret, how many identities did she have? I count at least 4 different names here. I opened one of the boxes labeled Elena Rodriguez and found photographs of Patricia with people I'd never seen before. A man with dark hair and kind eyes. Children who looked like they could be Patricia's but whom I'd never met. Margaret, look at this. I showed her a photograph of Patricia holding a baby, standing next to the dark-haired man in front of a house I didn't recognize. When was this taken? Margaret asked, examining the photo. I looked at the date stamp on the back. 1976. Margaret, we've accounted for the time Patricia spent with you and with me. But this photo is from 1976. Where was she in 1976 that neither of us knew about? Margaret was going through another box. Bill, look at these bank statements. She has accounts in 4 different states, under 4 different names. How much money are we talking about? Thousands of dollars. Maybe tens of thousands. I felt sick. Margaret, I think Patricia might be a professional con artist. I think what happened to us might be part of a pattern she's been running for decades. But Bill, if she was just running cons, why did she stay with us for so long? Why didn't she take our money and disappear years ago? It was a good question, and one I didn't have an answer for. Professional con artists didn't usually maintain relationships for 45 years. As we continued searching through the storage unit, I found something that made my blood run cold. A manila envelope labeled insurance policies contained life insurance documents on both Margaret and me, with Patricia as the beneficiary. Margaret, did you know Patricia had a life insurance policy on you? What? No, of course not. She has one on me, too. $500,000 each. Margaret went pale. Bill, are you thinking what I'm thinking? I'm thinking that maybe Patricia wasn't planning for these relationships to end with her confessing. Maybe she was planning for them to end with our deaths. We stared at each other across the storage unit, both of us realizing that Patricia's deception might be even more sinister than we'd imagined. We need to call the police, Margaret said. Do we? What crimes has she actually committed? Bigamy, maybe identity theft. But we don't have proof she was planning to hurt us. The insurance policies, Bill. The forged signatures. The stolen identities. Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Rebecca, calling from Patricia's bedside at the hospital. Dad, you need to come. Mom collapsed this morning, and the doctors say she might not have much time left. I looked at Margaret, surrounded by evidence of Patricia's multiple lives and potential crimes, and I realized that whatever the truth was about Patricia's intentions, we were running out of time to get answers. We're on our way, I told Rebecca, as Margaret and I locked up the storage unit and drove to the hospital. I couldn't shake the feeling that Patricia's confession about having to Pamela's was just the tip of the iceberg. The woman I'd loved for 45 years wasn't just living a double life. She was living multiple lives. And I had no idea who she really was or what she was really capable of. But she was dying. And if we wanted the truth, we were going to have to get it from her before it was too late. The 3 days after that devastating conversation were the longest of my life. Margaret and I had exchanged phone numbers, and we'd been calling each other constantly, trying to process what Patricia had told us and figure out what to do next. On Friday morning, Margaret called me at 7 a.m. Bill, I've been awake all night thinking. We need to talk to the children before we do anything else. All of them. Yes, Rebecca and my 3. They deserve to know the truth before this becomes a legal matter. I'd been dreading this conversation. Margaret, how do we tell our adult children that their entire lives have been built on lies? I don't know, but Patricia is dying. If we're going to tell them, it has to be soon. What about this Robert Chen that Patricia mentioned? Shouldn't we find out about him first? I hired the private investigator to look into that. But Bill, I keep thinking about what Patricia said about loving both of us. Do you think that's possible? I'd been wrestling with the same question. I don't know, Margaret. Part of me wants to believe that our life together was real, that her feelings for me were genuine. But how can you love someone you're lying to every single day? Maybe that's something we need to ask her directly. That afternoon, Margaret and I drove to Patricia's apartment, a place I'd never seen before. In a part of town I rarely visited, it was a modest one-bedroom unit that looked like a temporary space. Not somewhere someone had been living for years. Patricia answered the door, looking exhausted. The cancer was clearly taking its toll. She'd lost weight, her skin had a greyish tint, and she moved slowly. "Bill, Margaret, thank you for coming. We need to talk," Margaret said as we sat down in her small living room. "We need to understand more about Robert Chen." Patricia's face crumpled. "I was hoping you wouldn't find out about Robert." "How many more husbands are there, Patricia?" I asked. "Just Robert. I swear to you, just Robert. Tell us about him." Patricia was quiet for a long time, staring out the window of her apartment. "I met Robert in 1972, when I was 17. I was living in San Francisco, using a fake ID, trying to start over after leaving Ohio. Robert was 25, a graduate student in engineering. He was kind to me when I had nothing and no one." "So you married him?" "Yes, it was my first real marriage, not a con. I genuinely loved Robert, and he loved me. We were happy for about 6 months. What happened? I got pregnant. But I miscarried at 5 months, and it devastated both of us. Robert wanted to keep trying for children, but I couldn't handle the emotional risk of losing another baby. We started growing apart." Margaret leaned forward. "So you left him. I should have divorced him properly, but I was young and scared and didn't know how to handle adult responsibilities. So I just left, disappeared, created a new identity and started over in Colorado." "That's where you met Margaret," I said. "Yes, and Bill, I want you both to understand something. When I met Margaret, when I met you, those weren't cons. I wasn't looking for victims to defraud. I was looking for love, for family, for the life I thought I couldn't have with Robert." "But you never divorced Robert," Margaret said. "No. Which means every marriage after that was technically bigamy." I stood up and started pacing around the small room. "Patricia, do you understand what you've done to our families? Rebecca thinks she has no siblings. Margaret's children think they're all biological siblings. None of them know they have a stepfather they've never met. I know how complicated I've made everything." "It's not just complicated," Margaret said, her voice rising. "It's criminal. You've committed fraud, bigamy, identity theft. You could go to prison." "I'm already dying, Margaret. Prison is the least of my concerns now." "But what about us?" I asked. "What about our children? What about the mess you're leaving behind?" Patricia started crying. "That's why I told you the truth. Because I need your help cleaning up the mess before I die." "What kind of help?" "I need help telling the children. I need help making sure they understand that none of this is their fault, and that they still have family who loves them." Margaret was shaking her head. "Patricia, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I can help you explain to my children that their mother is a con artist and their family is built on lies. Margaret, please. Thomas and Linda and David, they're going to need you after I'm gone. And Rebecca is going to need Bill. But they're also going to need each other, because they're siblings whether we like it or not." "They're not siblings," I said. "Only 2 of them are actually related biologically. But they've been raised as siblings. They share the same mother, even if that mother isn't who they think she is." I looked at Patricia, this woman who'd shared my bed for 45 years. Who'd given birth to my daughter, who'd been the center of my life, and I realized I was looking at a stranger. "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Okay, did you ever love me, really love me? Or was I just another mark in a long con?" She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Bill, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I loved you from the moment I met you. I still love you. The life we built together, the happiness we shared, that was real. How can it be real if it was based on lies? Because love isn't about legal documents or social conventions. It's about what two people feel for each other, how they support each other, how they build a life together. Margaret spoke up. But Patricia, you can't build a real life on lies. Every day you spent with Bill was a day you were deceiving him about who you are. I know how wrong it was. But I also know that the woman Bill fell in love with, the woman who raised Rebecca, the woman who shared his life for 45 years, she's real. She's part of who I am, even if she's not the whole truth. I sat back down, feeling exhausted. What do you want from us, Patricia? I want you to help me tell the children the truth. I want you to help them understand that they still have family, even if it's not the family they thought they had. And I want you to forgive me, if that's possible. Margaret and I looked at each other. We were both victims of Patricia's deceptions, but we were also the only people who could help our children navigate the aftermath of those lies. We need time to think about this, Margaret said finally. Of course. But please, don't take too long. The doctors say I might only have a few more months, and I don't want to die without making this right. As Margaret and I left Patricia's apartment, I realized that we were facing an impossible choice. We could expose Patricia's crimes and probably send our children into therapy for years. Or we could help her manage the revelation and try to preserve what family bonds we could. Either way, none of our lives would ever be the same. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Rebecca and asked her to come home. Not for a holiday or special occasion, just because I needed to see her. "Dad, you're scaring me," she said when I picked her up at the airport Sunday evening. "You sounded so strange on the phone." "Sweetheart, there are some things about our family that I need to tell you. Things that are going to be hard to hear." Rebecca studied my face as we drove home. At 43, she looked so much like Patricia at that age that it took my breath away. Same green eyes, same determined chin, same way of tilting her head when she was concerned. "Is Mum sick?" she asked. "Yes, she is. But that's not the only thing we need to talk about." That evening, I sat my daughter down in our living room and tried to figure out how to explain that her entire understanding of our family was wrong. "Rebecca, what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you know about our family. But I want you to know that my love for you hasn't changed and never will change." "Dad, you're really scaring me now." I took a deep breath. "Your mother has been living a double life for our entire marriage. She has another family that we've never met." Rebecca stared at me like I'd started speaking a foreign language. "What do you mean, another family?" "I mean she's been married to someone else for 50 years. She has 3 other children who think she's their mother. She's been dividing her time between 2 families, 2 lives, for 45 years. That's impossible. I know it sounds impossible, but it's true. All those business trips, all those visits to relatives we never met, she was with them." Rebecca stood up and started pacing, just like I'd been doing all week. "Dad, this is insane. Are you having some kind of breakdown?" "I wish I was, sweetheart. But I've met the other woman. I've seen the documents. I've talked to your mother about it. It's all true." "Where is Mum now?" "She's with them. With her other family." Rebecca sat back down heavily. "So our entire life together has been a lie. Not a lie. Different than we thought, but not a lie. Your mother loves us, Rebecca. Our family is real, even if the circumstances are more complicated than we knew." "Dad, how is this possible? How do you maintain 2 families for 45 years? I don't know, sweetheart, but she did it. Rebecca was quiet for a long time, staring at the family photos on our mantelpiece. Do I have siblings I've never met? 3 of them. Thomas is 47, Linda is 44, and David is 41. They don't know about us. No, they think your mother travels for work when she's here with us. This is insane. Rebecca put her head in her hands. Dad, what are we going to do? I don't know yet, but there's something else you need to know. Your mother is sick. She has cancer, and she doesn't have much time left. Rebecca looked up at me with tears in her eyes. How much time? Maybe 6 months. And she wants to tell everyone the truth before she dies. Yes, she wants both families to meet, to understand the situation, to hopefully support each other after she's gone. Dad, I don't know if I can handle meeting the people who've been sharing my mother with me for my entire life. I understand, sweetheart, but think about it from their perspective too. They're going to find out that the woman they thought was exclusively their wife and mother has been living a completely different life with us. Rebecca was crying now. Why would she do this? Why would anyone choose to live like this? I've been asking myself the same question. I think she got trapped in a situation that started small and grew out of control over the years. But Dad, this means our marriage isn't legal, doesn't it? You're not really married to Mum. That's right. So what does that make me? What does that make our family? I reached over and took her hand. It makes you my daughter, the same as you've always been. Legal documents don't create love, Rebecca. Choice does. I chose to be your father every day for 43 years, and I'll keep choosing it for the rest of my life. But what about Mum? Can I still consider her my mother if she's been lying to me my entire life? That's something you'll have to decide for yourself, sweetheart. We talked until late that night, with Rebecca asking questions I didn't have answers to, and me trying to help her process information that I was still struggling with myself. The next morning, Margaret called. Bill, I told my children yesterday. Thomas, Linda, and David. They're devastated. How did they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Thomas is angry. Linda is confused. David wants to meet you and Rebecca. Rebecca wants to meet them too. I think she's curious about the siblings she never knew she had. Patricia wants to arrange a meeting. All of us together. She thinks it would be better to have one big family meeting, rather than trying to manage separate conversations. I looked at Rebecca, who was sitting at the kitchen table, reading through some of Patricia's old letters that I'd found in a box in our closet, when I asked, this weekend, Saturday afternoon. Patricia says she doesn't have much time left, and she wants to see all her children together at least once before she dies. Where? My house. It's bigger, and it's neutral territory for your family. After I hung up, Rebecca looked at me with determination in her eyes. Dad, I want to do this. I want to meet them. Are you sure? No, I'm not sure about anything anymore, but they're going through the same thing we are, and maybe we can help each other figure out how to deal with it. Okay, sweetheart, but Rebecca, I need you to understand that this meeting might be emotional and difficult. These people are strangers to us, but they're also family in a way. I know, but Dad, I keep thinking about something. Mum is dying, and when she's gone, you and I are going to be the only ones who remember our life together as a family. But those other people, they're going to remember a different version of Mum, a different version of the family. Maybe we need each other to keep all those memories alive. As I looked at my daughter, this amazing woman I'd raised to be, strong and compassionate and wise, I realized that she might be right. Our family was about to expand in the strangest way possible. But maybe that expansion could heal some of the damage Patricia's deceptions had caused. Saturday was going to change all our lives forever. Saturday arrived, grey and drizzling, which seemed appropriate for what was about to be the most difficult family meeting in history. Rebecca and I drove to Margaret's house in nervous silence, both of us wondering what we were walking into. House was even more impressive in daylight than it had been during my first visit. It was a large colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn and flower beds that spoke of years of careful attention. As we walked up the front steps, I couldn't help but think that Patricia had been living a more comfortable life here than she had. With us, Margaret opened the door before we could knock. She looked as nervous as I felt. "Bill, Rebecca, thank you for coming. Thank you for having us," Rebecca said politely, though I could hear the tension in her voice. The living room was crowded. Patricia sat in a wheelchair by the window. She'd deteriorated significantly in just the past week. Around the room sat 3 adults I'd never met but who looked familiar in ways that made my heart ache. Thomas was tall and broad-shouldered, with Patricia's green eyes and a serious expression that reminded me of Rebecca when she was trying to solve a problem. Linda was petite and blonde, with delicate features and Patricia's smile. David was medium height, with dark hair and an intensity that was pure Patricia. "Everyone," Margaret said, "this is Bill Harrison and his daughter, Rebecca." The introductions were awkward and painful. How do you introduce people who are simultaneously strangers and family? How do you explain relationships that have no name? Patricia spoke first, her voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is impossible and confusing and painful, but I needed you all to meet each other before." She couldn't finish the sentence. Thomas, who seemed to be the spokesperson for his siblings, spoke up. "Patricia, we need to understand something. When you were with them, did you ever think about us? Did you miss us?" "Every day," Patricia said, tears streaming down her face. "Every single day I was away from any of you. I missed you terribly." "Then why did you do it?" Linda asked. "Why didn't you just choose one family?" "Because I couldn't bear to lose any of you. I know that sounds selfish and impossible, but it's true." Rebecca, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "I need to ask something, and I need everyone to hear the answer. Mum, when you were with us, when you were being our wife and mother, was it real? Or were we just an obligation you had to fulfill?" Patricia looked at Rebecca with such love and pain in her eyes that I had to look away. "Rebecca, sweetheart, every moment I spent with you and your father was real. Every bedtime story, every birthday cake, every time I told you I loved you, it was all real. The woman who raised you is a real part of who I am." "But you're also the woman who raised us," David said, his voice tight with emotion. "So which family was real? Which family was the priority?" "Both, neither. I don't know how to answer that question because I lived both lives completely." Margaret, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Patricia, I think what the children need to understand is why. Not just how you managed to do this, but why you chose this life instead of making the hard choice to be honest with one family or the other." Patricia was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I was pregnant when I met Margaret. Pregnant with another man's child that I lost at 6 months. I was devastated, broken, convinced I would never be a good mother. When I met Margaret, she was so kind, so loving, so sure that we could build a family together. When Thomas came into our lives, when I found him and brought him home, Margaret welcomed him like he was a gift." She turned to look at Margaret. "You made me believe I could be a good mother. You made me believe I deserved love and family. But then you met Bill." Thomas said. Yes, and Bill was different from Margaret, but he was also kind and loving, and he made me feel worthy of love in a different way. When I got pregnant with Rebecca, I thought maybe I could finally have the biological child I'd always wanted. So, you kept both families because we fulfilled different needs? Rebecca asked. I kept both families because I loved you all. Because walking away from any of you felt like cutting off a piece of my soul. David leaned forward. But don't you understand what you did to us? Don't you understand that we've all been living incomplete lives? Rebecca never knew she had siblings. We never knew we had a sister. Bill and Margaret never knew they were sharing you. I know how much damage I've caused. Then why? Linda asked, her voice breaking. Why didn't you trust us enough to tell us the truth? Why didn't you think we were strong enough to handle complicated circumstances? Because I was afraid you'd leave me. All of you. I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd decide I wasn't worth the complications. The room fell silent. I looked around at these 6 people, Patricia, Margaret, and 4 children, who were all dealing with the revelation that their entire understanding of family had been wrong. Finally, Rebecca spoke. Mum, I can't speak for everyone else, but I need you to know something. Learning the truth about our family has been devastating. Finding out that our life was built on lies has shaken everything I thought I knew about myself. Patricia was sobbing now. But, Rebecca continued, I also need you to know that the love I felt from you, the security I felt in our family, the happiness we shared, that was real for me. You were my mother, fully and completely, even if you were also their mother. At the same time, Thomas nodded slowly. I feel the same way. The woman who raised me, who loved me, who made me feel safe and wanted, she was real. Even if the circumstances were more complicated than I knew. We're not saying we understand, Linda added. We're not saying we're okay with what you did. But we're saying that our love for you was real, and I think your love for us was real, too. David spoke last. What we need to figure out now is what happens next. What happens to our family, to both our families, when you're gone? Patricia looked around the room at all of us. That's up to all of you. I hope you'll stay connected. I hope you'll be there for each other, because, regardless of how complicated the circumstances are, you're all family. Margaret stood up and walked over to Patricia's wheelchair. Patricia, I need to say something to you. She knelt down beside the wheelchair and took Patricia's hands. I'm angry with you. I'm hurt and confused, and I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what you did or why you did it. But I also need you to know that the 50 years we spent together were the best years of my life. You were my wife, my partner, the love of my life. And nothing about the complications of our situation changes that. I found myself standing up and walking over to them. Patricia, Margaret's right. I'm devastated by what I've learned, but I'm also grateful for the 45 years we had together. You were my wife, Rebecca's mother, the center of our family. The fact that you were also their wife and mother doesn't diminish what we shared. As the 7 of us stood together in that living room, I realized that Patricia had done something terrible and wonderful at the same time. She'd created 2 families built on lies. But she'd also created 2 families built on genuine love. The question now was whether those 2 families could become one family that could survive the truth. 3 weeks after that emotional family meeting, I was sitting in a lawyer's office with Margaret, trying to untangle the legal mess Patricia had created over 5 decades. The revelations kept getting more complicated. I'm afraid there's more. Bad news, the attorney said, spreading documents across his desk. We've located Robert Chen, Patricia's first husband. and he's very much alive." Margaret and I looked at each other. We'd almost forgotten about Robert in the chaos of everything else. "Where is he?" I asked. "San Diego. He's been looking for Patricia for over 50 years. He never remarried because, legally, he was still married to her." "Does he know about us?" Margaret asked. "He does, now. I contacted him as part of our investigation, and he wants to meet with both of you." I felt exhausted. How many more surprises are there going to be? Well, there's one more thing. Patricia owns property in 4 different states under her various identities. Houses, land, even a small business in Texas. The estate is going to be much more complicated than anyone anticipated. Margaret shook her head. "How much money are we talking about?" "Conservatively, about $2 million in assets, but also significant debts in several states. And there's the question of inheritance. Legally, Robert Chen is her only legitimate heir, but morally, the children should inherit." I finished. "All 4 children. But we'll need to prove their relationships to Patricia, which means DNA tests and a lot of legal paperwork." After we left the lawyer's office, Margaret and I went to lunch. Over the past month, we'd developed an unlikely friendship born out of shared trauma and mutual confusion. "Bill, I keep thinking about what the lawyer said about Robert," Margaret said as we sat in a quiet restaurant. "This man has been searching for Patricia for 50 years. He never remarried because he thought he was still married to her, and technically he was, which means neither of us was ever really married to her. I'd been wrestling with that reality. Does it matter? Legal marriage is just paperwork. What we had with Patricia was real, regardless of what the law says. But it does matter for the children. Rebecca is your biological daughter, but legally, she might not have any inheritance rights. Same with Margaret's children. We'll figure it out. The children shouldn't suffer because of Patricia's choices." My phone rang. It was Rebecca, calling from Patricia's bedside at the hospital. "Dad, you need to come. She's asking for you and Margaret. She says there's something else she needs to tell us." Margaret and I drove to the hospital in tense silence. When we arrived, we found all 4 children gathered around Patricia's bed. She looked much worse than she had just 3 weeks ago. The cancer was progressing rapidly. "Bill, Margaret," she said weakly, "thank you for coming." "What did you need to tell us?" Margaret asked gently. "It's about Robert. I know you've found him." "Patricia, why didn't you ever divorce Robert properly?" I asked. "Because I was afraid. If I filed for divorce, he'd find me and I'd have to face what I'd done to him. Running away and disappearing seemed easier than dealing with the consequences." Thomas spoke up. "Mum, the lawyer says Robert never remarried because he was still legally married to you." "I know. I've destroyed his life too. He wants to meet us," Rebecca said. "All of us." Patricia closed her eyes. "He deserves that. He deserves to understand." "What happened, Patricia?" Margaret said. "Why are you telling us about Robert now?" "Because there's something about him you need to know. Something that affects all of you." We waited for her to continue. "Robert and I had a child together. Before I left him." The room went completely silent. "What?" Margaret whispered. "I was pregnant. When I left Robert, I told him I miscarried, but I didn't. I gave birth to the baby and gave him up for adoption. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me." "Patricia, are you saying there's another child?" "Yes, a son. He would be now. Do you know where he is?" David asked. "No, it was a closed adoption. But Robert has been looking for that child for 50 years too. He knows the baby survived." Rebecca was crying. "So, I have another brother I've never met." "We all do," Linda said quietly. "Another sibling who doesn't know any of us exist." Margaret were staring at Patricia with an expression I couldn't read. Patricia, how many more secrets are there? How many more lives have you damaged with your choices? I don't know. I've made so many mistakes, hurt so many people. I don't even know how to count them all anymore. Thomas stood up abruptly. I can't do this anymore. Every time we think we understand the situation, you tell us something that makes it more complicated. Thomas, please, no, Mum. This is too much. First we find out you have another family. Then we find out some of us aren't even related biologically. Now we find out there's another husband and another child. What's next? Patricia was crying so hard she could barely speak. I'm so sorry for all of it. David spoke up. Thomas is right. This is overwhelming. But Mum, you're dying. If there are more secrets, more people we need to know about, you need to tell us now. The adoption agency was called Family Services of Northern California. The child was born March 15, 1973. His birth name was Michael Walsh. But the adoptive family would have changed it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Patricia, why are you telling us this now? Because when I die, Robert is going to want to find his son. And I think he deserves your help. All of you, because that child is your brother, your stepson, your family, whether you've met him or not. As I looked around that hospital room at Patricia, Margaret, and 4 children who were still discovering the extent of their family connections, I realized that our story was far from over. Somewhere out there was a 51-year-old man who had no idea he was about to become part of the most complicated family reunion in history. Robert Chen arrived on a Thursday morning in late April, 2 days after Patricia had been moved to hospice care. Margaret and I met him at the airport, and I recognized him immediately from the photo Patricia had shown us years ago. Tall, distinguished, with silver hair and kind eyes that showed the weight of 50 years of searching. Mr. Harrison, Mrs. Cross, he said as we shook hands. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. Thank you for coming, Margaret replied. I know this situation is impossible for all of us. As we drove to the hospice facility, Robert told us his story. I've spent 50 years wondering what happened to Linda, to Patricia. One day she was there. We were planning our future together, talking about the baby we'd lost. The next day, she was gone. No note, no explanation, just an empty apartment and a broken heart. You never suspected she might have left you for someone else? I thought about it, of course. But all her belongings were still there. Her clothes, her books, even her purse. It looked like she'd been kidnapped, or something terrible had happened to her. What did you do? I called the police, filed missing person reports, hired private investigators. I spent thousands of dollars and years of my life trying to find her. The investigators found evidence that she'd created new identities, but the trail always went cold. Margaret turned to look at him from the front seat. Robert, did you know she was pregnant when she left? She told me she'd miscarried. She was devastated about it, and I thought that's why she'd been so distant in the weeks before she disappeared. She didn't miscarry. She gave birth to your son. Robert's face went white. What? She told us 3 days ago. A boy, born in March 1973. She gave him up for adoption through Family Services of Northern California. Robert was quiet for a long time, staring out the window. Finally, he spoke. I have a son. All these years, I have a son. Robert, I said gently, there's something else you need to know. Patricia, Linda, she's dying. Cancer, she probably only has a few days left. Can I see her? She wants to see you. But I need to warn you, she's very sick, and she's She's not the same person you knew 50 years ago." When we arrived at the hospice, all 4 children were already there. The introductions were awkward but less painful than they'd been the first time. Robert looked at Thomas, Linda, David, and Rebecca with wonder. "You're all her children," he said. "And you're her first husband," Rebecca replied. "The legitimate one," Robert smiled sadly. "I suppose that's true, though it doesn't feel very relevant anymore." Patricia was awake when we entered her room, though barely. She looked at Robert with recognition and burst into tears. "Bobby," she whispered, "you came." "Hello, Linda. Yes, I came. I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." Robert pulled a chair close to her bed and took her hand. "I know, I understand now. Do you hate me? I've hated you for 50 years. But seeing you now, seeing the family you built, understanding the complexity of what you were trying to do, I don't know what I feel anymore. Bobby, I need to tell you about our son. I know about him. Bill and Margaret told me. We have to find him. I've been looking for him for years. Linda, the adoption records are sealed, and the agency won't release information." David spoke up. "Maybe we can help. If we work together, pool our resources, hire investigators, we might be able to find him." "Why would you want to do that?" Robert asked. "Because he's our brother," Thomas said. "We've just discovered we have siblings we never knew about. Finding one more doesn't seem impossible anymore." Linda nodded. "And because Mum is dying, and if she's going to die, maybe she should die knowing that all her children are connected to each other." Patricia squeezed Robert's hand. "Would you do that? Would you help them find our son?" "Of course I will. But Linda, I need to ask you something. Anything. Did you ever love me? Really love me? Or was I just the first in a long line of men you deceived?" Patricia looked at him with tears streaming down her face. "Bobby, you were my first love. My first real love. What we had was genuine and pure and beautiful. I left you because I was afraid I wasn't good enough for that kind of love. Not because I didn't love you." "Then why didn't you come back? Why didn't you try to make it work?" "Because by the time I realized what a mistake I'd made, I'd already started the lies with Margaret, and then with Bill, and I got so tangled up in deception that I couldn't find my way back to the truth." Margaret, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Patricia, what do you want us to do after you're gone? How do you want us to handle all of this? I want you all to be a family. I know that sounds impossible given the circumstances, but you're all connected now. Robert, you're the father of my first child. Margaret, you're the mother of 3 of my children. Bill, you're the father of my youngest child. And all the children share me as a mother, even if the biology is complicated. That's not a conventional family structure," Rebecca said with a small smile. "Nothing about our situation is conventional. But love doesn't have to be conventional to be real." Robert was studying Patricia's face. "Linda, do you really think we can all become some kind of blended family after everything that's happened?" "I hope so, because when I'm gone, you're all going to need each other to make sense of this story. And somewhere out there is a 51-year-old man who's going to need all of you to help him understand where he came from." As we sat in that hospice room, surrounding the woman who had created the most complicated family situation any of us could imagine, I realized that Patricia was right about one thing. We were all connected now, whether we wanted to be or not. And somehow, we were going to have to figure out how to be a family. Patricia died 3 days later, on a quiet Sunday morning with all of us gathered around her bed. In her final moments, she looked at each of us and whispered, "Find Michael. Promise me you'll find our Michael." We promised. The funeral was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Margaret, Robert, and I sat in the front row as the 3 surviving spouses, with our 4 children beside us. Behind us sat people from Patricia's various lives, friends from her book club, neighbors from both neighborhoods, colleagues from jobs we didn't even know she'd had. The minister, who was clearly struggling with how to describe Patricia's life, settled on calling her a woman who loved deeply and lived complexly. After the service, the 7 of us, 3 spouses and 4 children, went back to Margaret's house to begin the process of planning our search for Michael. "I've already contacted 3 private investigation firms," Robert said, pulling out a folder of documents. "The good news is that adoption records from the 1970s are starting to become more accessible. The bad news is that it could take months or even years." "We don't have years," David said. "This man has lived 51 years not knowing he was adopted, not knowing he has siblings, not knowing his birth parents have been looking for him." Thomas had been researching online. "I found the adoption agency, Family Services of Northern California. They closed in 1985, but their records were transferred to the state." "What do we need to do?" Rebecca asked. "DNA," Margaret said. "We all need to submit DNA to every database available. If Michael has ever done an ancestry test, or if any of his children have, we might get a match." "That's a good start," Robert agreed. "But we should also petition the court to unseal the adoption records. As the biological father, I might have standing to request that information." Linda spoke up. "What if he doesn't want to be found? What if he's happy with his life, and doesn't want to know about us?" "Then we respect that," I said. "But we owe it to Patricia and to him to give him the choice." Over the following weeks, we threw ourselves into the search with an intensity that surprised me. Robert moved into a hotel nearby and became a constant presence in our lives. The children, who had started out as strangers, were becoming genuine siblings, bonded by their shared mission and their shared confusion about Patricia, Rebecca, and David. In particular, had connected immediately. They were close in age and had similar personalities, both analytical, both determined to understand the full scope of their mother's choices. "I keep thinking about what Michael's life has been like," Rebecca said one evening as we all gathered for dinner at Margaret's house. "Has he wondered about his birth parents? Has he felt like something was missing?" "Maybe," Thomas said. "Or maybe he's had such a good life with his adoptive family that he's never felt the need to search for his origins." "There's only one way to find out," Margaret said. 3 weeks into our search, we got our first break. David's DNA test had matched with someone listed as JM, a possible nephew or half-brother relationship. "This could be him," Robert said excitedly. "Or it could be one of his children." David had sent a message through the DNA website, carefully, explaining that he was looking for a biological relative born in March 1973 in California. 2 days later, he got a response. "My name is Jason Walsh. I think you might be looking for my father, Michael Walsh. He was adopted in 1973, and he's been wondering about his birth family for years. We found him." Michael Walsh lived in Portland, Oregon, where he worked as a high school principal. He was married to a woman named Sarah, and they had 3 children: Jason, age 24, Emma, age 22, and Luke, age 19. Robert was shaking when he made the phone call. "Hello, is this Michael Walsh?" "Yes, this is Michael." "Michael, my name is Robert Chen, and I believe I'm your biological father." The conversation lasted 3 hours. Michael had always known he was adopted, and he'd been searching for his birth parents since his adoptive parents died 10 years earlier. Learning that his birth mother had just died was devastating. but learning that he had 4 siblings and a birth father who'd been searching for him was overwhelming in the best possible way. "Can I meet all of you?" Michael asked. "Can I see pictures of my birth mother? Can I understand why she gave me up?" "Yes, to all of it," Robert said. "We have so much to tell you, and so much we want to learn about you." Michael flew down the following weekend with his wife Sarah and their youngest son, Luke. The reunion was emotional and complicated and beautiful. Michael looked like a combination of Robert and Patricia, tall like his father, with Patricia's green eyes and her expressive hands. When he smiled, I could see echoes of Rebecca's smile, and when he laughed, it was David's laugh. "I've dreamed about this moment for years," Michael said, as we all sat in Margaret's living room, now expanded to accommodate our growing family, "but I never imagined it would be this complicated." "None of us did," Margaret replied. "But Michael, I want you to know that your birth mother loved you. She made the decision to give you up because she thought it would give you a better life, not because she didn't want you." "Did she ever mention me over the years?" Michael asked. "Did she ever wonder about me?" Robert nodded. "She talked about you often. She carried guilt about giving you up for her entire life. I think that guilt was part of what drove her to create the complicated family structure she built. She was trying to make up for losing you," Rebecca said, "by collecting and keeping other children, other families." Michael was quiet for a long time, studying the photos of Patricia Weed spread across the coffee table. "She was beautiful. I can see myself in her features." "You have her intelligence," Thomas said, "and her determination. She would have been so proud to know you became an educator." "What do I call all of you?" Michael asked. "You're my siblings, but we're all adults with our own lives." "We're family," Linda said simply. "However that works, whatever that means, we're family." As I looked around that living room at this impossible family that Patricia had created through love and lies and loss, I realized that she'd been right about one thing. We did need each other to make sense of the story. 6 months after Patricia's death, we had all settled into an unusual but workable family dynamic. Michael had become a regular presence in our lives, flying down from Portland once a month for what we'd started calling family meetings. Robert had decided to stay permanently, buying a small house near Margaret's. He and Margaret had developed a deep friendship based on their shared experience of loving and losing. Patricia, the children, all 5 of them now, had created their own relationships independent of the complicated adult dynamics. Rebecca and Michael, as the oldest and youngest, had become especially close, often talking for hours about their different experiences of having Patricia as a mother. But our peaceful adjustment period ended when David discovered something that changed everything again. "I found another one," David announced at our monthly family dinner. "Another DNA match. Another sibling." We all stopped eating and stared at him. "That's impossible," Margaret said. "We know about all of Patricia's children." "Apparently, we don't." David pulled out his phone and showed us a message from the DNA website. "This person shares enough DNA with me to be a full sibling. Born in 1976, Robert went pale. 1976, but I left Linda in 1972. And she didn't meet Margaret until 1973. And she didn't meet me until 1978, I added. So who is the father of a child born in 1976? Michael leaned forward. Maybe it's one of the other identities she created. Maybe there was another husband, another life we don't know about. Rebecca was studying the DNA information. The match is with someone called AP, possible full sibling relationship. Female, based on the genetic markers. Another sister, Linda said quietly. "We have another sister." Thomas was shaking his head. How many more siblings are we going to discover? How many more lives did Patricia live that we don't know about? There's only one way to find out, Margaret said. David, send her a message. The response came within hours. The woman's name was Amanda Peterson, and she lived in Denver, Colorado. She was 37 years old, married with 2 children, and she'd been adopted as an infant. But the most shocking part of her message was the last line. I've been looking for my birth family for years, but I always thought my birth mother's name was Elena Rodriguez. Elena Rodriguez, one of the identities Patricia had used that we'd never fully investigated. Robert was staring at the message in disbelief. She had another life. Another complete life that none of us knew about. Robert, Margaret said gently, this means Patricia was pregnant with another man's child while she was married to you and while she was involved with me, and probably while she was creating the relationship with Bill. Michael added, I felt sick. You're saying that in the mid-1970s, Patricia was simultaneously maintaining relationships with at least 3 different men. It looks that way, David said. Rebecca was researching on her laptop. I found property records for Elena Rodriguez in Colorado. She owned a house in Denver from 1975 to 1978. 3 years, Thomas said. She lived a completely separate life in Denver for 3 years, which means, Linda said slowly, that during those 3 years, she was dividing her time between at least 3 different families in 3 different states. The logistics alone were staggering. How had Patricia managed to maintain relationships with Margaret in one state, build a relationship with me in another state, and live a third life in Colorado, all while pregnant with and then caring for another child? We need to call Amanda, Margaret said. We need to understand what kind of life Patricia built in Colorado. The phone call with Amanda Peterson was heartbreaking and revealing. Amanda had grown up believing her birth mother was a single woman named Elena Rodriguez, who had given her up because she couldn't provide for a child. She'd been raised by loving, adoptive parents, but she'd always wondered about her origins. Elena Rodriguez, your birth mother. She wasn't single, Rebecca told her gently. She was our mother too, but she used a different name with us. Her real name was Linda Walsh, but she called herself Patricia with our families. Are you saying my birth mother had multiple identities? Yes, and multiple families. Amanda, you have 5 siblings you've never met. Amanda was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. This explains so much. I always felt like there were pieces missing from my birth story. The adoption agency said my birth mother was mysterious, secretive, that she didn't want to provide much information about the father or her circumstances. Do you know anything about your biological father? Michael asked. Only that his name was supposedly Carlos Rodriguez, and that he abandoned my birth mother when she got pregnant. Amanda, I said, I don't think Carlos Rodriguez exists. I think that was another false identity your birth mother created. So I have no idea who my biological father is. Not yet. But we can help you find out. We've all been doing DNA testing to understand our family connections. Amanda agreed to fly out the following weekend to meet all of us. As we prepared for yet another family reunion, I couldn't help but wonder how many more siblings we were going to discover. Do you think there are others? Margaret asked me as we cleaned up after dinner. I don't know. But Margaret, I'm starting to think Patricia's life was even more complicated than we imagined. If she was maintaining 3 separate families in the 1970s, and if she continued that pattern, there could be families out there who still don't know she's dead. The thought was chilling. Somewhere out there, there might be people waiting for Patricia to come home, not knowing that she'd died 6 months ago. surrounded by a family they'd never heard of. Amanda's visit was scheduled for the same weekend that we'd planned to sort through Patricia's remaining belongings, items that had been stored in a rented unit under another false name. I had a feeling that storage unit was going to reveal more secrets about the woman we'd all loved and lost. Amanda Peterson arrived on a Friday evening looking nervous and overwhelmed. She was petite like Linda, with Patricia's green eyes and a smile that was pure Rebecca. When she walked into Margaret's living room and saw all of us gathered together, she started crying. "I've wondered about my siblings my entire life," she said. "I used to imagine what you all looked like, what your lives were like. I never imagined there would be so many of you." The introductions were easier this time. We'd developed a routine for integrating new family members, and Amanda seemed more prepared for the complexity than we'd been initially. But as we sat down to talk, Amanda pulled out a manila envelope that immediately caught my attention. "Before we get started," she said, "I need to show you something I found in my adoptive parents' belongings when they passed away. Something that's going to change everything you think you know about our mother." She opened the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of documents, letters, photographs, and what looked like official papers. "These are letters Elena wrote to my adoptive parents over the years. Letters explaining her situation and why she had to give me up." Margaret reached for one of the letters. "What do they say?" "They say that Elena Rodriguez wasn't just another identity Patricia created. Elena Rodriguez was her real name." The room went completely silent. "What do you mean?" Robert asked. Amanda pulled out what looked like a birth certificate. "Patricia Cross, Linda Walsh, those were the false identities. Elena Rodriguez was who she really was." I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. "Are you saying that everything we thought we knew about Patricia was backwards?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. According to these documents, she was born Elena Rodriguez in Mexico in 1954. She came to the United States illegally when she was 15. But she had social security cards and driver's licenses under other names." David protested. "Forged, all of it. She created false identities because she was undocumented." Margaret was reading through one of the letters with tears in her eyes. "This letter explains everything. She says she came to the US to escape an abusive family situation in Mexico. She says she created false identities because she was afraid of being deported." "There's more," Amanda said. "She wasn't a career criminal running marriage cons. She was an undocumented immigrant trying to survive. By creating legal identities that would allow her to work, get health care, and build a life." Robert was staring at the documents in disbelief. "You're telling me that Linda Elena was never trying to defraud anyone? She was trying to exist in a system that wouldn't recognize her legal right to be here." Rebecca spoke up. "But Amanda, what about all the marriages? What about the bigamy? According to these letters, she fell in love with multiple people over the years. But she couldn't legally marry any of them because she didn't have legal status. So she created identities that would allow her to have the family she wanted." Thomas was shaking his head. "This doesn't make sense. Why didn't she ever tell us the truth?" Amanda pulled out another letter. "This one explains it. She says she was terrified that if any of you knew she was undocumented, you'd either abandon her or accidentally expose her to immigration authorities." I felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak washing over me. So when she told me she loved me, when she built a life with me, that was real. It was all real. She wasn't running cons. Dad, she was trying to build genuine relationships while hiding the fact that she had no legal right to exist in this country. Margaret was crying now. She carried that fear for 50 years. She lived in terror of being discovered and deported. There's something else, Amanda said quietly. Something about our biological fathers. What about them? Elena's letters mentioned that she had relationships with 5 different men over the years. But she could never tell any of them the truth about her legal status. She was afraid they'd reject her if they knew. 5 men? Michael asked. Robert, you were the first. Then there was Bill. Then there was Margaret. Yes, Margaret. Elena was bisexual and genuinely loved you. Then there was a man named Carlos in Colorado who is my biological father, and apparently there was someone else later. Another child? Linda asked. The letters mentioned someone named Sophia, born in 1985. Elena's last child before she got too sick to continue having children. I felt overwhelmed. You're saying there's another sibling out there, a 6th child, possibly, but there's something else you need to know about Elena's situation. Amanda pulled out the last document from the envelope. It was a medical record. Elena had a condition called dissociative identity disorder, what used to be called multiple personality disorder. The room went completely silent. She wasn't consciously creating false identities to deceive people. She was genuinely experiencing herself as different people in different contexts. Margaret looked up from the medical record. Are you saying that Patricia genuinely believed she was different people with each of us? To some extent, yes. The letters describe how she would become Patricia when she was with you, Margaret. She would become Linda when she was with Robert and Bill. She would become Elena when she was with Carlos and me. But she was aware enough to write these letters explaining the situation. David pointed out. Yes, but only sometimes. The letters describe periods of clarity where she understood what was happening, alternating with periods where she genuinely believed she was living separate, disconnected lives. I was trying to process what Amanda was telling us. So the woman I married wasn't intentionally deceiving me. She was protecting herself the only way she knew how. And her mental condition made it possible for her to genuinely love multiple people without feeling like she was betraying any of them. Robert was staring at the medical records. This explains so much. Why she could seem so genuine with each of us. Why she never seemed to feel guilty about the deception. Because, from her perspective, there wasn't deception. There were just different aspects of herself living different lives. Margaret stood up and walked to the window. All these years, I thought she was a criminal. I thought she was a con artist who had deliberately hurt us. She was a victim, Amanda said quietly, a victim of circumstances, of her mental health condition, of an immigration system that forced her to live in hiding. As I looked around the room at this family that Elena, not Patricia, had created through love and necessity and illness, I realized that everything we thought we understood about our story was wrong. We weren't the victims of a criminal conspiracy. We were the beneficiaries of a woman's desperate attempt to create family and belonging while living in fear and mental illness, but that still didn't answer the question of whether there was another child out there, another sibling who needed to be found. The search for Sophia began immediately. Armed with Elena's real name and the knowledge that she'd had another child in 1985, we hired a new private investigator who specialized in cases involving undocumented immigrants. What we discovered over the next month painted a picture of Elena's final years that was both heartbreaking and heroic. Sofia Rodriguez was born in Los Angeles in March 1985. The investigator told us during a meeting at Margaret's house, but the situation was different from the other children. How different? Rebecca asked. Elena was very sick by then. The dissociative episodes were getting worse, and she was struggling to maintain her various identities. According to hospital records, She gave birth under her real name, Alina Rodriguez, and listed the father as unknown. Robert leaned forward. What happened to Sophia? She was placed in foster care immediately. Alina was deemed unfit to care for a child due to her mental health issues and undocumented status. Did Alina ever see her again? Margaret asked. Yes, but here's where the story gets complicated. Alina would visit Sophia in foster care under different identities. Sometimes she was Patricia Cross, claiming to be an aunt. Sometimes she was Linda Walsh, claiming to be a family friend. I felt my heart breaking. She was trying to stay connected to her daughter even though she couldn't legally claim her. Exactly. And here's the remarkable part. Sophia's foster family, the Hendersons, knew what was happening. They knew Alina was using false identities. They figured it out. But instead of reporting her, they worked with her. They let her visit Sophia regularly, and they even let Sophia know that Alina was her birth mother. Amanda was crying. So Sophia grew up knowing our mother. She grew up knowing one version of our mother. She knew Alina Rodriguez, the undocumented immigrant with mental health issues who loved her daughter desperately but couldn't care for her properly. Michael spoke up. Where is Sophia now? That's the good news. Sophia Henderson, she took her foster family's name when they adopted her at age 16, lives in Seattle. She's 38 years old, married with 2 children of her own, and she works as a social worker specializing in immigrant families. Does she know Alina died? Thomas asked. Yes. The Hendersons contacted her when they saw Alina's obituary. But Sophia doesn't know about any of you. Rebecca stood up. We need to call her. Wait, Margaret said. We need to think about this carefully. Sophia had a different relationship with Alina than the rest of us did. She knew the truth about Elena's immigration status, her mental illness, her struggles. Meeting us might be overwhelming. Or it might be healing, Linda suggested. She might want to know that Alina had other children who loved her. David had been researching on his laptop. I found Sophia's social media accounts. She posts a lot about immigrant rights and mental health advocacy. It looks like Elena's situation shaped her career choices. That makes sense, Amanda said. Learning about Elena's struggles probably motivated Sophia to help other people in similar situations. Robert was looking at photos of Sophia on David's laptop. She looks like Alina. Really looks like her. Should I call her? I asked, or should it be one of the women? I think it should be Amanda, Margaret said. Amanda understands the immigration and documentation issues better than the rest of us. That evening, Amanda made the call. We all gathered around the speakerphone in Margaret's living room as the phone rang. Hello, the voice was confident, professional. Is this Sophia Henderson? Yes, this is Sophia, who's calling. My name is Amanda Peterson, and I believe Alina Rodriguez was your birth mother. There was a long pause. Yes, she was. How do you know, Alina? Because she was my birth mother too. Sophia, I'm your sister. What? Alina had 6 children over the course of 30 years. 5 of us have found each other, and we've been looking for you. I don't understand. Alina never mentioned other children. She lived a very complicated life, Sophia. She had multiple identities, multiple families. She was trying to survive as an undocumented immigrant while dealing with mental illness. Sophia was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. Are you saying I have 5 siblings I've never met? Yes, and 3 stepfathers, who all loved Alina and want to meet you. This is impossible. Amanda's voice was gentle. I know it sounds impossible. It sounded impossible to all of us when we first learned about each other. But Sophia Alina loved all of us. She created different families because she was trying to give each of us the best life she could manage. Where are you all? Most of us are in California. We get together once a month to share stories about Alina and support each other through understanding her complicated life. What kind of stories? Rebecca spoke up. Stories about how much she loved us, even when she couldn't show it in conventional ways. Stories about how she sacrificed her own safety and peace of mind to give us families and stability. And stories about how brave she was. Michael added, how she built multiple lives from nothing, always putting her children's needs ahead of her own fears. Sophia started crying. I always wondered if she regretted having me. If she wished she'd never gotten pregnant with a child she couldn't care for. Sophia, Margaret said, Alina never regretted any of her children. She was proud of all of you, and she would be especially proud of the work you're doing to help immigrant families. You know about my work. We researched you before calling, Sophia. You became exactly the person Alina would have wanted you to become, someone who helps people in situations like hers. Can I meet all of you? Of course, I said. We'd love to meet you. And Sophia, Thomas added, we have so many stories to tell you about Alina. Good stories. Happy stories. Stories about how much joy she found in being our mother despite all the complications. As we planned Sophia's visit for the following weekend, I realized that our family circle was finally complete. 6 children, 3 fathers, and 1 remarkable woman who had created an impossible family through love, necessity, and sheer determination. Alina Rodriguez had given us all something precious. Not just life, but the bonds of family that transcended legal documents and social conventions. Now, it was up to us to honor her memory by being the family she'd always wanted us to be. Sophia's visit happened during a warm weekend in late September, exactly 1 year after that first devastating phone call from Margaret Cross. As I watched our complete family gather in Margaret's living room, 6 siblings, 3 and assorted spouses and children, I marveled at the journey that had brought us all together. Sophia fit in immediately. She had Elena's strength and compassion, but also a wisdom born from understanding the immigration and mental health struggles that Elena had faced. She brought with her a box of letters Elena had written to the Henderson family over the years. Letters that filled in the final pieces of our mother's story. Elena wrote this letter to my adoptive parents in 1990, Sophia said, reading from a handwritten page. She says, I know Sophia will ask about her siblings someday. When that day comes, please tell her that she has brothers and sisters who don't know about her yet, but who will love her when they find her. Tell her that every choice I made was about trying to give all my children the best life possible, even if that meant keeping them apart. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes. She knew this day would come. She knew we'd all find each other eventually. There's more, Sophia continued. She wrote, I hope someday my children will understand that I wasn't running from love, I was running toward it. Every new identity, every new relationship, every new family was an attempt to create more love in the world, not less. Robert, who had been quiet through most of Sophia's visit, finally spoke up. Sophia, do you think Alina was happy? Despite all the complications, despite the fear and secrecy, do you think she found happiness? Sophia smiled Elena's smile that we all recognized. I think she found moments of happiness with each of you. The letters describe how much joy she got from watching all of us grow up, even when she couldn't be fully present in all our lives. What about regrets? Margaret asked. Did she express regrets about the choices she made? Only one, Sophia said, pulling out a final letter. This one is dated just 2 months before she died. She wrote, My only regret is that I couldn't find a way to bring all my families together while I was alive. I hope my death will be the catalyst that finally unites all the people I love. As I looked around the room at this extraordinary family Alina had created, I realized she'd gotten her wish. Her death had indeed brought us together. And what we'd built in the years since her passing was stronger than any conventional family I'd ever known. Michael had moved to California to be closer to all of us. Amanda visited every few months and had become especially close to Linda and Rebecca. Thomas and David had started a small business together. Robert and Margaret had developed a deep friendship and were considering moving in together as companions. Not romantically, but as two people who understood each other's loss. But perhaps, most importantly, we'd all found peace with Elena's choices. "Need to say something to all of you," I said, standing up in Margaret's living room. When I first learned about Margaret and the other family, I felt betrayed and angry. I thought Alina had deceived me, used me, made me an unknowing participant in adultery. I paused, looking at each face in the room. But over this past year, I've come to understand something important. Alina didn't make me the other man. She made me one of many men who were privileged to love an extraordinary woman. She didn't cheat me out of a conventional marriage. She gave me a love that was deeper and more complex than anything I could have imagined. Margaret nodded. I feel the same way. Alina wasn't a bigamist who deceived multiple husbands. She was a woman who had so much love to give that she created multiple families to contain it all. And we weren't victims of her deception, Robert added. We were beneficiaries of her courage to love broadly and deeply, despite the risks. Sophie was crying now. Elena would be so happy to hear you say that. She was terrified that when the truth came out, you'd all hate her for the complications she'd created. How could we hate her? Rebecca asked. Look what she gave us. Look at this family. 6 siblings who adore each other. 3 fathers who've become friends. A dozen grandchildren who are growing up knowing they're part of something special. Amanda spoke up. Alina taught us something important about family. She showed us that family isn't just about blood relations or legal documents. Family is about choice, commitment, and love. And about forgiveness. Linda added, Alina made choices that were complicated and sometimes painful, but she made them from love, not selfishness. David was looking at his laptop. I've been putting together a family tree for all of us. Not a conventional one, but one that shows all the connections Alina created. It's beautiful. Complicated, but beautiful. Can we see it? Thomas asked. David turned his laptop around, and we all gathered to look at the diagram he'd created. It showed Alina at the center, with lines connecting her to Robert, Margaret, and me, and then lines connecting her to all 6 children. And then lines connecting all the children to each other and to their own families. It looks like a constellation, Sophia said softly. That's exactly what it is, Michael said. Alina created a constellation of love. All of us orbiting around her memory, but also connected to each other. As the evening wound down and people began to say their goodbyes, I realized that this had been the most unconventional and meaningful year of my life. I'd gone from thinking I had a wife and daughter to discovering I had an extended family that included 5 additional children and 2 additional partners. But more than that, I'd learned something profound about love and forgiveness. Elizabeth's story had taught me that people can make choices that seem wrong from the outside but come from a place of love and necessity. Her story had taught me that families can be built in ways that don't follow conventional patterns but are no less real or meaningful. As Rebecca and I drove home that night, she said something that perfectly captured how I was feeling. Dad, a year ago I thought I was an only child. Tonight, I said goodbye to 5 siblings, 3 stepfathers, and a dozen nieces and nephews. Elena didn't just give me life, she gave me the biggest, most loving, most complicated family anyone could ask for. Do you think she knew? I asked. Do you think Elena knew that her death would bring us all together like this? I think she hoped it would. I think every choice she made was a gamble that love would ultimately win out over confusion and hurt. As we pulled into our driveway, the same driveway where this journey had begun with a phone call from Margaret Cross, I realized that Elena had been right to gamble on love. Her extraordinary life had created an extraordinary family, and her death had brought us all home to each other. We weren't the traditional family any of us had expected to have. But we were the family Elena had dreamed of, creating a constellation of love that would continue to shine long after she was gone.